I was the victim of cruel family favoritism, pushed down the stairs by my jealous brother. What happened next would change everything. My family chose him over me, but the truth would come out, and I would finally get justice. I've always been the screw-up. That's what they told me, anyway. My younger brother, Jake, was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Even when he broke a dish or spilled milk, my parents would somehow find a way to blame me. And me? I could have saved the world and still gotten nothing but a half-assed, "That's nice, Ryan," while Jake got praised for existing. It was always like that. Jake could breathe and get a standing ovation, while I was the invisible one. I was the one who got blamed for things as small as a broken plate, but no matter how hard I tried, nothing ever seemed to be enough. I spent years trying to make something of myself, but it didn't matter. To them, I was always second-rate. I remember the time I landed a scholarship, the first real thing I'd ever earned. I was proud of it. Hell, I was finally doing something that felt worth it. I told them, hoping for some kind of recognition. My mom's face barely changed. "That's nice, Ryan, but can you pay for it?" She wasn't even looking at me when she said it. My dad nodded, distracted by the TV. Jake, sitting there with his stupid smirk, casually dropped, "You know, law school's probably not even worth it if you're going to struggle to pay for it, right?" I stared at him. What the hell was wrong with this family? Jake was spoiled, and it wasn't even subtle. He got whatever he wanted without ever lifting a finger. I busted my ass working 2 jobs just to scrape by, and still nothing. My parents might have been proud of Jake for getting an A on his history test without studying, but me? I had to fight for every damn thing. But it was all Jake. He had this charm, like he could twist everything around to make it look like I was the problem. He'd break my stuff, and somehow I'd be the one who got blamed. He always knew how to play the victim. I was just the guy who could never get a break. And I hated it. Every damn second. I'd been busting my ass for years, trying to get ahead, and finally, I'd done it. I'd gotten into the local law school, the one with a reputation for actually being worth something. It wasn't Harvard or Yale, but it felt like the first step toward something real. I wasn't just the screw-up anymore. I was somebody. I couldn't wait to tell my parents. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally see me for what I was, someone who'd worked his ass off and earned this. So, at dinner that night, I sat down, tried to hide my grin, and dropped the bomb. "Hey, I got into law school," I said, leaning back, waiting for the praise. My mom barely looked up from her plate. "That's good for you, Ryan. But how are you going to pay for it?" She was already cutting into her steak, not even pausing to process what I'd said. I blinked. I've applied for scholarships, and I've been looking into work-study programs too. I'm figuring it out. Jake, sitting across from me, snorted. "Work-study? Yeah, that's going to be fun. I mean, law school's great and all, but if you're drowning in debt, what's the point? Might not even be worth it." He grinned, like he'd just delivered some killer wisdom. I clenched my fists under the table. "I'll figure it out. It's worth it to me." Jake shook his head like he'd just witnessed the biggest joke. Sure. Keep telling yourself that. You know, you could have taken a gap year or something. I mean, you're in your 20s, right? Why rush?" I felt my blood pressure spike. I didn't take a gap year, Jake, because unlike you, I actually have to work for things. That shut him up for a second, but it didn't last long. My parents, on the other hand, had found something else to latch onto. My dad, without looking up, mumbled, "Jake's got a point. He's not wrong about the whole financial thing. College isn't easy, especially for someone who doesn't have any help." It was like a punch to the gut, and it wasn't even subtle. Jake did nothing. He floated through life, and I was the one who had to claw my way through every inch of mine. And still, they treated him like he was the one with the bigger struggle. I stared at my plate, trying to breathe, but it wasn't working. You know, Jake barely even tries at school, and he's going to get some sort of scholarship for doing nothing. He has no ambition, no goals. And you, Ryan. My mom cut me off, her voice flat. "We're talking about your future here, not his." I almost laughed. That's all it ever was, my future, and every time I tried to get them to care, they deflected to Jake's laziness. They'd never even realized how screwed up it all was. They never saw that Jake didn't need to try, because everything was handed to him. Meanwhile, I was burning myself out just to survive, and no one noticed. I pushed my chair back, standing up before I could say something I'd regret. "Forget it. I'm just trying to make something of myself. But it doesn't matter, right? I'm still the screw-up, Still the one who'll never get it right. Jake just raised an eyebrow, his smirk returning. Whatever, man. You'll figure it out. You always do. Then he turned back to his phone, probably posting about his latest accomplishment on Instagram, like he'd just done something extraordinary. I walked out of the kitchen before I could blow up, the air in my lungs tight, my chest burning. All that work, all those years of struggle, and they couldn't care less. They would never look at me the way they looked at him. I wasn't their golden boy. I was just the guy who would always be second. Always. The next few weeks felt like a slow grind. Every time I turned around, Jake had found a new way to screw with me. It started small. He'd move things around, hide my textbooks, make a mess in my room, and then blame me for it. I'd find my stuff broken or out of place, and when I'd confront him, he'd act all innocent and confused, like he had no idea what happened. "Ryan, what the hell? What did you do to my headphones?" I'd say, seeing them snapped in half. Jake would give me that smug smile of his, shrugging. "I didn't touch your stuff. Maybe you were too rough with them or something." And just like that, my word meant nothing. My parents would back him up without question, saying I was probably too rough or careless with my things. It didn't matter that I was careful or that he'd been in my room when I wasn't there. It was always my fault. I had to replace the headphones, and a few weeks later, my laptop went missing. When I found it, it was dropped in a sink, waterlogged and ruined. "You really need to keep better track of your stuff," Jake said when I stormed into the living room, soaked with frustration. I couldn't even afford half the things I was losing, and replacing them, that meant putting off my bills. But none of it mattered to Jake. He got to live in his little bubble, and I was the one left picking up the pieces. I tried to focus on my studies, tried to tell myself it was all worth it, that things would get better. But every time I sat down to work, I found my motivation slipping away like sand through my fingers. Then one evening, I heard something that made my blood run cold. I was hanging out with a couple of friends, trying to forget about the mess at home, when someone mentioned that Jake had been spreading rumors about me. "Heard you're not really going to law school," one of my friends said, the words hitting me like a slap. "Jake said you were just making it all up to look good." I froze. "What?" "Yeah, he said you didn't actually get in. Just told everyone you did. Is that true?" I felt like someone had just yanked the ground out from under me. My stomach twisted. I knew Jake could be an ass, but this was next level. It wasn't just pranks anymore. It was an outright attack on everything I'd worked for. I stood up without thinking. "I'm going to talk to him." When I stormed into the living room, Jake was lounging on the couch, like he owned the place. My parents were nowhere in sight, which gave me a brief moment of hope that maybe I could get through to him. "Jake," I started, my voice tight with anger. "What the hell is this about you telling people I lied about law school?" He didn't even look up from his phone. "What? No idea what you're talking about." I leaned in, trying to keep my voice steady. "People are talking, Jake. You've been telling them I didn't get in. Why the hell would you do that?" He finally looked up, that same damn smirk on his face. "I just thought it was weird, you know? You're not really cut out for law school. You're gonna burn out, just like you always do." He shrugged. "Just didn't think you'd mind me telling the truth." It hit me then. He didn't care about the truth. He just wanted to drag me down. Again. "You know damn well I'm not lying," I said, feeling my patience crack. "I worked my ass off to get there. I've been busting my balls for years while you float through life with no consequences." Jake stood up, stretching lazily. "Oh, come on, Ryan. You know I don't mean anything by it. It's just a little fun. Don't take it so seriously." The nerve of him. He had this way of turning everything around, making it seem like I was the one overreacting. Like I was the crazy one. "You're not getting away with this," I said, my fists clenching. But Jake just laughed. "Relax, man. You're being so dramatic. It's not even that big of a deal." And just like that, the conversation was over. He walked past me like nothing had happened, off to wherever he went when he wasn't making my life hell. I stood there, staring at the empty space where he'd just been, the weight of everything sinking in. I was never going to win with him. He was always going to be one step ahead. And my parents? They didn't even care. Every time Jake made a move, they backed him up, pretending I was the one making things up. So I did what I always did. I swallowed the frustration, buried the anger, and tried to keep moving forward. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be long before everything finally came crashing down. The hospital was the only place where I felt a flicker of peace these days. The only place where someone actually cared about me. My grandmother, always the one who had my back when no one else did, had fallen ill. She'd been getting weaker over the past few months, and now she was in the hospital, preparing for surgery. The doctors said she had a good chance of pulling through, but still, I couldn't help the knot in my stomach every time I saw her lying there, pale and frail. I spent every day at the hospital with her. I didn't care about the world outside. All I cared about was making sure she knew someone was there. She was the only one who ever told me I was enough. "Ryan, I'm so proud of you," she said one day, her voice shaky but sincere. "I've watched you work hard all these years. Don't you forget how strong you are." Her words were the first real validation I'd felt in forever. It almost made everything worth it. Almost. But even in this moment of peace, Jake couldn't stay out of it. The second he found out my grandmother was sick, he made a big show of being concerned. He'd visit, play the part of the doting grandson, always putting on a front for my parents, who ate it up. They all gathered around my grandmother's bed, acting like they cared, but I saw through it. It was all about making Jake look good. It always was. On the third day of my grandmother's surgery, I needed a break. I had spent the entire morning by her side, and I was starting to feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. I stepped outside to grab a coffee from the cafe in the lobby, trying to clear my head. I wasn't gone more than 15 minutes, but when I returned, I saw Jake hanging around the stairwell. He didn't even look up when I walked by, and I thought maybe I was imagining things. I was halfway up the stairs when it happened. Without warning, Jake shoved me. Hard. There was no time to react. I felt my feet leave the ground, my body twisting uncontrollably as I plummeted down the stairs. Pain shot through me like a jagged knife. My back slammed into the concrete, my limbs jerking painfully with each bounce down the steps. The world went black for a second, the kind of black that swallows you whole and leaves nothing behind. I could barely breathe. My body crumpled at the bottom of the stairs, everything aching, everything broken. But then I heard it, the sound of Jake's footsteps, slow and deliberate as he walked to the top of the stairs, looking down at me. I couldn't speak. My head was spinning, and I could feel the blood rushing in my ears. But through the haze, I saw him smile. A smug, satisfied smile. "You deserved it," he said, his voice so casual, like he was commenting on the weather. I tried to move, tried to scream, but the pain was too much. I couldn't do anything but lay there, helpless, as Jake stood at the top of the stairs, watching me. He didn't call for help, didn't lift a finger to help me. Instead, he just turned around and walked away, leaving me alone on the cold floor. I didn't know how long I lay there. It felt like forever. My body wouldn't respond. I couldn't even summon the energy to scream for help, though I knew someone would find me soon enough. My body was alive with pain, but the thing that hurt the most was the realization that my entire family, my parents, Jake, had always seen me as nothing, just something to break and leave behind. I couldn't believe this was my life. But somehow, I knew that from this moment on, I wouldn't be able to walk away from it. Not without something breaking for good. I don't remember much after I hit the bottom of the stairs. The pain was too sharp, too immediate. My body felt like it was on fire, and the world spun in a way that made everything blurry. The next thing I knew, I was being rushed to the hospital, my vision half gone, my body shaking uncontrollably. I could hear voices, people shouting, but it all sounded so distant, muffled, like I was underwater. "He's losing consciousness. BP's dropping," a voice shouted as they moved me through the hallway. The lights flashed past, the sharp smell of antiseptic in the air. I tried to move, tried to tell them what happened, but nothing came out. My lips were swollen, my throat was raw. All I could do was feel the agony in my chest, in my back, in my limbs. And then, in the midst of all the chaos, I heard Jake's voice. "I can't believe this is happening," he wailed, just loud enough for me to hear. "Ryan, you're such an idiot. You were always clumsy. Look at what you've done to yourself." I tried to focus on him, but the pain kept dragging me back into unconsciousness. Still, his words dug into me like a knife. Clumsy? It was like he was mocking me for the situation he'd caused, acting like I'd somehow tripped down the stairs on my own. When they finally wheeled me into a trauma room, I heard my parents. They were there now, my mom's voice soft and worried, my dad's more annoyed than concerned. "Why would he be so careless?" my mom asked, her voice shaking. "What was he even doing in the stairwell?" I wanted to scream. What was I doing? I was trying to get away. I was trying to get away from the hell Jake had been making of my life for years. But my throat was too swollen and my body too broken to get the words out. Jake, standing at the edge of the room, sniffled like he was going to break down any minute. I don't know what happened. He just tripped, I guess. His voice cracked, and he wiped his eyes dramatically. I didn't mean for this to happen. Bullshit. He was lying. I knew it. But no one was listening to me. My parents were already all over him, comforting him, telling him it wasn't his fault. He was their golden boy, the one who could never do anything wrong. I finally managed to croak out a few words, but they were weak, barely audible. Jake. He pushed me. My mom didn't hear me, though. She was still focused on Jake. Oh, sweetheart, don't worry about it. Ryan's been through a lot. She turned toward me, but not with the urgency I needed. Ryan, you need to rest now. Don't talk. I felt my chest tightening. This was wrong. I was in here, barely hanging on, and they couldn't even see it. They were more concerned with Jake's feelings than with me. Their precious son. Their perfect child. And I was just the one who always screwed things up. I looked over at Jake. His eyes flicked to me, then away, like he knew I was onto him but couldn't care less. He didn't seem upset. He didn't seem sorry. He was just relieved I wasn't dead. He was still the one in control, still the one who could manipulate everyone around him with his smile and his tears. And then, just as the nurse began tending to me, I saw something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. From the corner of the room, a nurse named Laura was standing in the doorway. She looked like she was about to leave, but then she froze. I could barely keep my eyes open, but I saw her pull her phone out of her pocket and hit record. She was pointing it straight at Jake, who was too busy pretending to be emotionally wrecked to notice. You deserved it, Jake had said, loud enough for her to catch it on the phone. I saw her eyes flicker toward me, then back at him. She must have known what had happened. She must have known he was the one who shoved me. I don't know what happened after that. I lost track of everything, the world slipping in and out of focus as the doctors worked on me. But I held on to that moment. I held on to the fact that someone had witnessed the truth. Because it was clear now that no one else in my family would ever see it. No one except Jake, of course. He was still pretending to be the victim, still making his tears his greatest weapon. Meanwhile, I was lying here, broken, unable to move or even speak without pain. And no one but Laura, seemed to care. But she knew. And that meant everything. I spent most of the next few days in and out of consciousness, the pain in my body a constant reminder of what had happened. I couldn't remember much after the surgery, just flashes of light and the sound of machines beeping around me. But one thing kept pulling me back, the thought of what Jake had done, how everyone in my family was treating it like some accident, a bad fall that was my fault. But there was something I hadn't realized at the time. That nurse, Laura, she'd seen it. She knew. I couldn't remember much about her, just a glimpse of her face in the corner of my mind. But I knew she was different from the others. She wasn't acting like everyone else, pretending nothing had happened. She'd been watching Jake. She had seen him push me, heard the words he'd said, and unlike the rest of my family, she wasn't going to let it slide. It wasn't long before I found out what she had done. Laura had contacted Carl, the head of hospital security, and they reviewed the surveillance footage from the stairwell. I was too weak to understand at first, but the next day, Laura came into my room while I was still hooked up to machines. She was looking at me like she knew something I didn't, and she asked if I was okay to talk. Ryan, she started gently, her voice low so no one else could hear. I know what happened. I blinked, still groggy, but I knew exactly what she meant. I had no strength to say anything, but I nodded slightly. Your brother, he pushed you, she said, and there was no judgment in her voice, just the truth. I tried to respond, but my throat was still too raw. Instead, I just looked at her, the anger, the disbelief, all of it flooding back. He said something, too, she continued, pulling out her phone. I recorded it. His words, you deserve it. It's all there. She showed me the video, the grainy footage of Jake standing at the top of the stairs, a smirk on his face as he watched me fall. It was the first time I'd heard those words out loud, and I didn't know how to process them. The fact that Jake had said it, that he hadn't even cared enough to hide his satisfaction, it felt like a knife through everything I had ever known about my family. Laura didn't stop there. I spoke to Carl. We reviewed the security footage from the stairwell. It's all there, Ryan. He shoved you, and we've got it on tape. My heart slammed against my ribs. She leaned in closer, her voice a little softer. "We're showing this to the police. They'll start an investigation." I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt this sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted, but another part of me was already bracing for what was coming. Because deep down, I knew how my family would react. Laura gave me a sympathetic look. "I'm sorry this happened to you." The next few hours felt like a blur, but by the time I had another clear moment, the reality of what Laura had done started sinking in. I was still lying there in that sterile hospital room, but now there was a chance for justice. Unfortunately, the same couldn't be said for my parents. They still had no clue about what was happening, still clinging to their image of the perfect family. Even when the police came to question me, they acted like I was the one overreacting. Detective Harper was the one leading the investigation. A no-nonsense woman who didn't waste time with pleasantries. She seemed determined to get to the bottom of it. She asked me what happened, but the truth was I could barely get the words out. I was still too weak to say much, but I could tell by the way she looked at me that she didn't need much more than the footage and the recordings to know the truth. But my parents? They still didn't get it. They were too wrapped up in Jake's version of events, too eager to protect him and pretend everything was fine. They wouldn't listen when I tried to explain what had really happened, and even worse, they didn't seem to care that my life was in pieces. At some point, my grandmother came to visit, still recovering from her own surgery. She looked at me, her expression soft, but I could tell the worry in her eyes hadn't eased. She'd always been the one to make me feel like I mattered, like I wasn't invisible. But this time, there was something different in her voice. "I've made arrangements, Ryan," she said, taking my hand gently. "I've requested legal guardianship over you. Your parents, they're more concerned with appearances than with what's best for you." I blinked, my mind still cloudy from the drugs, but her words hit me like a punch. Guardianship. It felt surreal, but in that moment, I realized how much it meant. For the first time in my life, someone in my family was choosing me. I couldn't speak at that moment. My throat wouldn't let me, but I nodded, a lump in my throat. It was like a lifeline thrown to me when I thought I was drowning. My grandmother wasn't just saving me from my parents' indifference. She was giving me a chance to escape the nightmare that had been my family for so long. And for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't over yet, but maybe, just maybe, things were starting to change. Jake didn't seem to care one bit that things were starting to unravel. In fact, he acted like he was untouchable, walking around like nothing had changed, like no one knew the truth. He still wore that smug look, like he was the victim, not the one who'd shoved me down the stairs. Every time I saw him, he'd give me a tight-lipped grin, as if daring me to do something about it. I hated the way he acted like everything was under control. Even with the police investigation and the evidence stacking up against him, Jake was too comfortable, too cocky. And my parents? They were no better. They clung to him like he was their only hope, still pretending none of it was his fault. When Detective Harper contacted them with the full story, footage from the cameras, Laura's recording, and the clear evidence of Jake's actions, they acted like they were in shock, but only for a moment. They didn't want to believe it. They couldn't. It was easier to protect their son than to admit the truth. I heard my dad on the phone with the lawyer late one night, his voice low but angry. "We need someone who can fix this. We can't let this go public. It'll ruin everything." They weren't thinking about me. They never were. A week later, the media picked up on it. The footage was leaked, and suddenly everyone knew what had happened. The story spread like wildfire. I could hear people talking behind my back, whispering when I walked by. The family that had looked so perfect was falling apart in front of everyone's eyes. And Jake? He was still playing the part of the poor, misunderstood brother. But my parents weren't about to let their golden boy take the fall. They hired one of the best lawyers in town, a high-priced defense attorney who was known for burying cases under layers of confusion and technicalities. They weren't trying to get Jake out of trouble. They were trying to erase the truth, and in doing so, they expected me to play along. That's when they came to me. One afternoon, after a long day of interviews and police questioning, my parents showed up at my hospital room, their faces tight with frustration. I couldn't even bring myself to care. I knew what was coming. "Ryan," my mom started, her voice too sweet, like she was trying to convince me this was all for my own good. "We need you to retract your statement. You know how much this is going to hurt your brother, how much it's going to affect the family. If you just tell them it was an accident, everything will go back to normal." I couldn't believe she was saying this. I couldn't believe she actually thought I'd do that. No, I said, barely able to control the anger that surged up. It wasn't an accident. He shoved me. He meant to do it. My dad cut in, his voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. Ryan, you don't understand. This is going to ruin your brother's life. He'll never be the same if you press charges. He's just a kid, Ryan. You have to think about the family. I stared at him, feeling like the ground was slipping out from under me. You're worried about him? I could feel the words building up, thick with disgust. You're worried about how he's going to feel? What about me, huh? What about the fact that I'm in here because your precious son pushed me down a flight of stairs? They fell silent for a moment, both of them looking like they were struggling to process the words I'd said. But then my mom, ever the enabler, spoke again, softer this time. Ryan, please. This isn't just about him. It's about everyone. It's about keeping the family together. We can make this all go away if you just retract your statement. But I knew the truth now. I knew that no matter what I said, no matter how much I suffered, it wouldn't matter. Not to them. I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my throat. You're unbelievable. You really think I'm going to pretend it didn't happen? You think I'm just going to protect him again after everything he's done to me? My dad's face twisted with frustration. You're being selfish. It hit me like a ton of bricks. They really didn't get it. They didn't care about me. They never had. I turned my face away from them, unable to even look at them anymore. I'm not retracting my statement, I said quietly, and I'm not going to let you sweep this under the rug. Not this time. There was a long pause, and then my mom sighed, standing up. You're making a mistake, Ryan. A big one. She looked at my dad, and they shared some silent exchange, both of them too scared to admit what was really going on. But it didn't matter anymore. They could keep trying to protect Jake. They could keep pretending that everything was fine, but I knew the truth now. And so did the world. As the days passed, more people came forward. Old friends of mine, people who had seen Jake's manipulation over the years, started speaking up. People who had watched my family turn a blind eye when Jake sabotaged me, when he lied and twisted everything to his advantage. It wasn't just my word anymore. It was the truth, and people were starting to see it. Still, my parents kept pushing. They kept pleading for me to back down, to make it go away. But there was no going back. And there was no way I was going to let them pretend I didn't matter, not anymore. The courtroom was colder than I expected. The tension hung thick in the air, and as I sat there waiting for the trial to begin, it felt like my heart was about to beat out of my chest. This wasn't just about the incident with Jake anymore. This was everything. The years of neglect, the constant sabotage, the endless manipulation. It was all coming to light now. I kept trying to keep it together, but as I took the stand, everything started to blur. The moment I opened my mouth, it felt like I was reliving every moment of pain I had spent in that house. Mr. Donnelly, the prosecutor asked, her voice steady. Can you tell us about the relationship you had with your brother, Jake? I took a deep breath and began. We didn't have a relationship. Not really. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, like I was finally saying something that had been buried for years. Jake. Jake was always the golden child. My parents showered him with praise for doing the bare minimum, while I was blamed for everything. Every mistake. Every broken plate. If something went wrong, it was always my fault. I could hear Jake shifting in his seat behind me, but I didn't look at him. I focused on the prosecutor, who was giving me a look that said she was listening, that she understood. Did your brother ever try to hurt you before the incident in the stairwell? She asked. I swallowed hard, the memories coming back in waves. Yeah, I said, my voice a little more firm this time. It wasn't just that fall. He'd always find ways to sabotage me, break my stuff, mess with my things, and then make me look like I was the one who'd done it. He would manipulate my parents into believing me to be the problem, even when it was him. I paused, the weight of the words hitting me harder than I thought it would. This wasn't just about one incident anymore. This was about everything that had built up over the years. I worked 2 jobs just to make ends meet while Jake did nothing. I was invisible to my parents, but they couldn't see him for what he really was. It was always me who got the blame. He was always the one who could get away with anything. There was a moment of silence in the room as I took in what I had said. I looked at the jury, their faces neutral, but I could see some of them were starting to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Good. Let them hear it. Let them see what my life had been like. When Jake's lawyer called him to the stand, I knew he was going to try to spin it all in his favor. He took the stand with his usual charm, his face a perfect mask of innocence. "I don't know what happened that day," Jake said, his voice cracking just the right amount. "I was just trying to help my brother. He's always had these issues. I never meant for it to go this far." He was trying to play the misunderstood victim, trying to paint me as the one who pushed things too far, who overreacted to everything. But I could see through it. I'd seen this act before. And then came the moment that would turn the trial on its head. During cross-examination, Jake's lawyer pressed him on his actions that day, asking him why he'd been so close to me when I fell. Jake shifted in his seat, his usual arrogance starting to crack. "I didn't push him," he said, a little too quickly. "He tripped. It wasn't my fault." The lawyer pressed harder. "But you were right behind him when it happened. Didn't you try to help?" Jake's smile faltered for a second. Then he sat up straighter, trying to recover. "Look, if I wanted to kill him, he'd be dead." The words hung in the air like a bomb. The courtroom went silent. I felt a chill run through me as every pair of eyes in the room turned toward Jake, watching him. His smug expression faltered as he realized what he'd just said. The prosecution jumped on it immediately. "Isn't that an admission of intent?" Jake's lawyer tried to salvage it, but the damage was done. He had just revealed more than he'd ever meant to. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't some simple mistake. It was deliberate. And with that one line, he exposed himself. The prosecution's case was airtight. The security footage showed Jake shoving me down the stairs. The phone recording captured his confession, and the testimonies from people who had witnessed his behavior over the years painted a picture of a manipulative, spoiled child who had gotten away with everything, while I was left to bear the brunt of it. As the trial dragged on, I watched Jake squirm. The smug smile was gone now, replaced by a nervous twitch. The jury was starting to see him for what he really was. When the verdict came down, it wasn't a surprise. Jake was convicted. Finally, after years of living in his shadow, of being blamed for things I didn't do, of being nothing more than a punching bag for the family's dysfunction, I had won. I sat in that courtroom, the weight of it sinking in, the truth finally coming to light. The years of abuse, the emotional and physical toll, everything that had been buried under lies and manipulation, was now out there for everyone to see. I wasn't the screw-up anymore. I wasn't the invisible one. Jake's conviction wasn't just about what happened that day. It was about everything he had done to me over the years of neglect and manipulation from our parents, and the damage they had done to me by allowing it all to happen. For the first time, I felt like I was finally being seen. And that meant everything. The months after the trial felt like a blur, like I was moving in slow motion, yet everything around me was changing. The conviction of Jake, my brother, the one who had been the golden child for so long, gave me a sense of freedom I didn't even know I needed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just a bystander to my own story. I wasn't just the family screw-up or the punching bag anymore. I was free. With the court's ruling, my grandmother was granted legal guardianship over me. I moved into her house shortly after, and honestly, it felt like I was breathing fresh air for the first time. Her home was small, simple, but it was mine now. And it was filled with love, the kind I'd been denied for so long. For once, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. She was everything to me. Every night after work, I'd sit with her in the kitchen, talking about anything and everything. Sometimes, she didn't have to say much. Just her being there, listening, made all the difference. It was healing, having someone believe in me when my own parents had spent years treating me like I didn't matter. But my parents? They couldn't just let go. They tried, of course, but it was clear they didn't understand. They reached out, sent texts, even showed up at my grandmother's house once or twice, trying to offer apologies and half-hearted attempts at reconciliation. They said they were sorry for what happened, but it never felt real. They were more concerned with their reputation, with saving face, than with how they'd treated me. One afternoon, my mom came over with a basket of fruit and some baked goods, pretending like everything could just go back to normal. "Ryan," she said, her voice still carrying that same tone of pleading. "You know we didn't mean for any of this to happen." I didn't even look at her. "I don't think you ever meant for anything to happen. You just didn't care." That stung her. It was like I could see it in her eyes, this quiet admission that, deep down, she knew what she'd done. I didn't want them in my life anymore. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about knowing that I'd been better off without them. I had my grandmother, I had my peace, and I was building something new. The old narrative they had woven around me was gone, and I wasn't about to let them rewrite it. The next big step was when I graduated with my law degree. It felt surreal, walking across that stage. After everything, years of fighting, years of silence, years of being overlooked, it was finally real. The diploma felt heavy in my hands, but not because it was a reminder of how far I'd come. It felt heavy because it was a symbol of how broken I had been, and yet, how much I had rebuilt myself. I decided to focus my career on helping those who'd been ignored or mistreated, people who didn't have a voice or a family to back them up. I'd spent too many years being invisible, being the one who didn't matter, and I was determined to make sure others didn't go through the same thing. My experiences were shaping me into the kind of lawyer I wanted to be, someone who stood up for what was right, no matter the cost. Someone who would fight for people who had been pushed aside. Sitting in my office, looking out at the skyline, I reflected on the long journey I'd taken to get here. The people who had stood in my way, the people who had left scars, had only made me stronger. And in a strange way, I was grateful for it. Because now, I could do the work that mattered. Now, I could rebuild my life the way I wanted to. I had spent so much of my life trying to earn the approval of people who would never give it to me. Now, I was earning something much more important, my own respect. And for the first time, I felt like I was finally on the path to finding true strength. No matter how broken you are, no matter how many times you're knocked down, it's possible to rebuild. I was proof of that.